pray that we're encouraged by that. I'm going to ask you to turn with me to the book of Psalms this morning, Psalms 84. I do not have today the overhead PowerPoint projection for this message. This actually kind of was developed in me this morning as I did my own personal devotions, and then this beautiful wife that the Lord gave me, we just kind of sat and unpackaged and had our own worship time this morning as we were just sharing the devotion that God had put into our hearts with each other. And it was developing the message for me this morning. And so she already got a bit of the precursor to it, but I want us all to be encouraged by it this morning. So turn to Psalm 84, if you will. As you're turning there, just a quick kind of housekeeping note. Next week, Maureen and I will not be here. Actually, we have the possibility of getting away for a little bit. So we're getting away for the weekend. So actually, Mark will be sharing the message next week. So we're very blessed to have just a good resource of preachers and teachers in this body. And we get to share that with you next week. And Mark will be preaching the word next week. So just a heads up on that in preparation for that. I let him know that I'd be making that announcement today. And he perceived it as though that'd be warning the people to stay away. And I'm kind of thinking, no, it'll get out there and we'll have more coming now. So I just want to encourage you all to come and receive in that. So as a background to Psalm 84, I just want to help us draw a bit of the picture as to the anticipation as the writer of this psalm and song would have been kind of some of the context as to what they would have known historically, what they would have known culturally, and as they were growing up. And it goes back to the aspect of, it actually is tied very much to their identity, in that when God looked down and he says, I have a plan of redemption for this world that has fallen. And this plan of redemption is going to flow through a people that I will make. As I look at this earth and I look at the people that have fallen, it's a fallen world, but I'm going to make a people in my sovereignty that my plan of redemption will be evident in them. And it started then in that conversation with Abraham, the calling of Abraham at that time, first of all. And he looked at Abraham, who was, culturally, as he was from the land of Ur, he probably would have been polytheistic in his views of God and different things like that, as far as culturally. And when God called Abraham and said, I'm going to make you into a people. And the irony was, here he was, knocking, on the door, being a centurion himself, 100 years old, his wife also there, and they were barren. And they desired a child. He desired an offspring. He desired an inheritance, or somebody that would carry on his inheritance. And God spoke to Abraham, and he said, I'm going to give you an offspring. I'm going to give you a unique one, a unique son that will bear. You're teaching, Kevin. It's bearing root here. We've already spoken to it a couple of times. And he will continue that inheritance. And it goes on through Abraham, through Isaac, and through Jacob. And as people that were begotten of that inheritance, how do you like that? I've been listening. They looked at it, and when they made the declaration that we serve the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, what they would have been looking at is we are people of that covenant. The covenant that God came down and made a covenant with Abraham and continued it through Isaac and Jacob and down through the lines. We are people of that covenant. And so the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is our God because we are people of that covenant. And as we look through the books of Moses, there was some structure given as people of that covenant as to what they were to look like. Specifically, we can look at the Ten Commandments to say, this is what will identify you, because this identifies me. As God showed, I've shared this before, it wasn't that God just gave a set of arbitrary rules to say, I think these are good rules, so this is what you should live by. God was actually revealing his own character in the Ten Commandments. And he says, so people of my covenant, as you look to the commandments to live by, as you look to the law and the rules to live by, as you look to them, and as you have relationship with me and with them, it actually reveals my character. And as you walk with them, you become a testimony of who your God is. People of my covenant. And so tied to that, they also had some extensions. They had regular feasts that they would go to, that they would journey back to specifically Jerusalem, journey back to where the center of where they were established. They were people of the promised land, a land that God had promised them. And they would make regular sojourns back to Jerusalem through different times of year and celebrate different feasts. Feasts that, again, revealed the identity of the God that they were in covenant with. And they would anticipate these different times, that they would come back and gather together corporately as a people and worship as covenant people their covenant God. And they would be excited about these times and these moments. I share that to say Psalm 84 is a story, it is a heart, it is an anticipation of people that that didn't necessarily live right in Jerusalem, but lived in far-off places, but an anticipation of making that sojourn, making that journey, making that pilgrimage to Jerusalem to worship together in these different anticipation and feasts that they were coming to. That's to paint the picture and the context of what's being laid down in Psalm 84 and the anticipation. Now, I could go much deeper into these things. That's just a broad overview, and I'm going to draw this, believe it or not, is tied to the theme that I've been talking about, identity in vision. And we talked about how to Proverbs 29:18, where it talks about where without vision, the people perish. And that picture of the word vision is without revelation, and literally was the aspect of without the prophets speaking, my people don't have a sense of direction. They cast off restraints. In the King James, we talked about how it says they perish. They are directionless. But the sense that they would come regularly to Jerusalem and have this place of worship and celebrate these feasts, it was the sense that they would continue to maintain this sense of vision and perspective as to who they were as covenant people, as a covenant nation, which is why they were anticipating this journey. And in particular, as the psalmist is writing here, anticipating he would love the nearness to be at that very place, at the temple gates, worshiping the Lord. So that's the context of Psalm 84. Let's read through Psalm 84 and do a brief kind of unpackaging of it. We'll go very briefly, but then I want to talk about kind of our application specifically today as the church, but also specifically today as we partake in communion and what that means and what that looks like. And how in our own hearts we should have that same sense of anticipation, that same sense of gathering, that same sense of identity. So Psalm 84, starting off in verse 1, it says, "How lovely are your dwelling places, O Lord of hosts. My soul longed and even yearned for the courts of the Lord. My heart and my flesh sing for joy to the living God." So we have this sense, the courts of the Lord, that place where that representation is specifically the temple, where the presence of God dwells. My soul longs for that place, to be in that close proximity with the Lord, to be right on the edge of the temple. The bird has also found a house, the swallow a nest for herself where she may lay her young. Even your altars, O Lord of hosts, my King and my God. So he's giving that sense where the sparrow that lives in that place builds her nests in the eaves. Oh, to be like that sparrow that raises her young just on the verge. If I could be that close, always, constantly with you, O Lord. And the psalmist is almost representing a sense of jealousy, but it's a righteous jealousy. That sense of, I want to be so close to my God like the sparrow is physically in that presence. And did you know that there's a sense? The Bible talks about our God as a jealous God. What's the context of that? The context of the jealous God is this. First of all, he's perfect. He knows what's the best for us. So when we wander off and we give our attention somewhere else, He's jealous for that attention. Not because he's insecure, but because he looks at us and he says, you are now setting yourself, you are wandering unrestrained. And I am jealous to have your attention, so you will remain in my protection. So you'll remain close to me. So just as the psalmist is revealing his sense of the closeness to God, God also has that desire. I just want to reveal that to you. He has that desire of closeness to us as well. To have our heart and have our attention. How blessed, verse 4, are those who dwell in your house. They are ever praising you. To be constantly in that place of praise. To be constantly in that place of just serving the Lord. He's saying, those that have that job, wow, are they blessed. Wow, are they blessed. Again, just continuing on here. How blessed is the man whose strength is in you, and whose heart are the highways to Zion. So that sense of the man who has his focus, the person who has their focus on the Lord and finds that as their sole desire to journey on, and that's where they draw their strength from. That they say, I am single-minded in my pursuit of the Lord, and whatever happens, that's what gives me strength to carry on and continue on. He says, and in whose hearts are the highways to Zion. There again, some versions say who have set their hearts on pilgrimage. So that sense of who have purpose to journey, to come to that feast. No matter what, the proverbial come hell or high water, I will be there. No matter what, because it matters. Because this is my identity. I am a covenant person coming to be with my covenant God. And I will take that journey no matter what. No matter where. It says that person, the one who has that, they pass through the valley of Baca and they make it a spring. The early rain also covers it with blessings. So that place, that sense of the valley of Baca, it can mean a couple of things. It can mean a place of weeping, or it can mean a place of desolation. But even as you walk through those valleys of desolation or those places of weeping, you are single-focused and single-minded to be in the presence of God, to draw your strength from Him. And so as you do that, not only do yourself make it a place of in your own life, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Why? For you are with me. So you go through these valleys, you go through these places of weeping or these places of desolation. But because you are single-minded and single-focused, because you have a vision of God, and He's revealed Himself to you, those places become places of springs and places of life. They are not places of death. They are places of life. If you want to think of the New Testament application, if you look to the hill called Golgotha, what's another name? They call it what? The skull, right? And that representation of the skull, it's death. As you look at the hill, you can see this kind of outline that it looks like a skull. And we often have, what's the aspect? When you have poisons, right? The traditional picture of a poison was what? Skull and crossbones, right? So you look at the hill of the skull, the representation of death. Now, it may not have had that application, but it represented one thing. And what happened on the skull? It was a place of punishment. It was a place of death. It's where they made these very public pictures and declarations where the domineering nation of Rome made examples of criminals. And they set them up on the skull and they said, look what happens if you defy our law. But we look at the skull, and though it may, in some people's minds, represent Baca, desolation, and waste. We look at it and we say it is what? It is life. That's where Christ surrendered himself completely to the will of the Father and became the sacrifice for us. So as the psalmist is saying, even though I wander through these death places, these wasteland places, because I'm single-minded on who I serve, because I have this vision of who God is. And remember, we talked about, we're unpackaging that picture of with your vision, it establishes your boundaries, right? It restrains you. It says, because I'm single focused on this vision, as I go through as I wander through these desolate places, it actually becomes a springs of well. Can you just use this human analogy as you're wandering along and you're walking through this place of darkness, and you're walking through and you're single-minded that you're on your way to Jerusalem to worship, to feast with your covenant God. And you're walking through and you know there's thieves and robbers around. You know that there's beggars around, and you know all these things, and you're walking along and they're stepping on, they're saying, why are you here? Why do you dare come through this dark place? And you say, because this is the place I must go to go to my destination. And as the thief and the robber comes along, and as the beggar comes along, and they look at you and they see that within you there's this well of life, because you have a vision, this well of life, of joy and strength within you. And what happens in your conversation with them is they say, why are you walking through here? Because I have a place and a destination. Well, are you not afraid of what could happen in this place? I am not afraid, because even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. I love the aspect when David writes that. Even though I go through the valley of the shadow of death, you are with me. Who has his attention? It is God. So as you walk through and you're going through the valley of the shadow of death, and you're praising God and you're celebrating it and you're anticipating the gathering with God and with God's people. And the thieves and the robbers hear you in the distance and they say, is he mumbling to himself? Is this man crazy because he's talking? And you're walking along and you're saying, I praise you, Lord. I celebrate you. You are the one that I love. You are the one that I adore. And they're coming along looking at you saying, what has happened? Has this man gone insane? I suspect there's some of you that grew up in non-Christian, non-believing cultures that as you came to faith in the Lord, you probably had family members and friends of your old life that looked at you and asked this question. Are you even sane? They may even have asked, well, actually, I'm around believers and they ask me that same question. You know that as we journey through this world, we are actually to look like aliens in this world? 1 Peter 2:9. We are aliens in this world. We look different. So as we walk through those desolate places, but we have our praise on, we have our focus, and our one single-minded journey that we have. The world looks around us, and they say, you look a little crazy. Now, to some who are on the edge of crazy, it looks appealing. And they say, I want to be the same kind of crazy as you. I'm just using human terms here. They're called crazy Christians, right? Yeah. 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 Yeah, we are. Sure. You can just say, I am. You know, crazy generally means we're out of our minds. That's good. Actually, we're supposed to be out of our mind and in his mind. That preaches right there, doesn't it? Yeah. Okay, so you're wandering through the valley. And you make it a place of springs. Why? Because you're single-minded in your focus. And you're saying, I'm looking to Zion and the King who resides there. Because I am his people. I'm in covenant with him. And there's some you will rub the right way, some you'll rub the wrong way. But you leave that to God because you're single focused on your walk and your journey. And that is to follow him. The early rain also covers it with blessings. So the early rain was a warning, or not a warning. It was maybe a warning of the spring rains. This is the fall rains. This is the sense where it's starting to sprinkle. There's going to be a little more of a downpour soon. This is the gentle season right now. But God comforts you in those things, in those moments. Verse 8, O Lord of hosts, hear my prayer. Give ear, O God of Jacob. There you have that sense again, O God of Jacob. What's he saying? Our covenant God. My covenant God. Hear my prayer, hear my cry. Verse 9, behold our shield, O God, and look upon the face of your anointed. So this is a sense where where the psalmist is now actually transitioning to pray for his king. Lord, as you've established one who is over our nation, may he know your blessing. May he know your goodness. May he know your mercy. May he know your grace. May he lead righteously. Is that a prayer we should probably be praying over our leader? Behold our shield, O God. Look upon the face of your anointed one. For a day in your courts is better than 1,000 outside, and I would rather stand at the threshold of the house of my God than dwell in the tents of wickedness. I would rather just stand in the door and serve at the threshold of your door than to sit at the table of privilege with the wicked ones. You could bring the application here where he's looking as a nation. We are your nation set apart. I would rather be on the peripheral of a covenant people than to be in privilege of the nations around us. Than to look like the culture. Verse 11, for the Lord is a sun and shield. The Lord gives grace and glory. And no good thing does he withhold. So that aspect of the sun, he's the one that provides life. He's also the one that provides protection. And no good thing does he withhold from those who walk uprightly. Again, being aware of what God has established, the order that he has established, and those who walk according to that order. He says there's nothing but goodness in walking according to the rules of being your covenant people. Not for the sake of just following rules, a list of do's and don'ts, but there is safety in the character of God. O Lord of hosts, how blessed is the man who trusts in you. Representing that picture of trusting in God's sovereignty. God is sovereign. He is the one who created the world. He's the one who holds the world. He's the one who will complete his will. Now, I want to do an exercise here this morning. I want to look at this. So I shared the cultural context to how, and again, I just kind of did a brief flyover here this morning because in a little bit we're going to start smelling the food coming up from downstairs, and then I lose your attention. So we want to kind of make this done before that. But consider this from the perspective. We're going to come back to this passage. Keep your finger in Psalm 84. Turn with me to the book of Luke. Luke chapter 22. We're going to read a passage similar to this in a few moments. So, first of all, ironically, the story centers around one of these feasts that the covenant people were gathering in Jerusalem for. It was the Passover feast. It was the remembrance of how God had delivered his people out of slavery and directed them to the promised land. I want to look very quickly at Luke chapter 22, verse 20. Again, the background here is Jesus is gathered with his disciples, and they're having a meal together, which was quite common. Their kind of Passover meal. It was the Thursday night of the Passover, because the Friday of the Sabbath started. So they were having their gathering here at this moment. And they were celebrating. And Jesus was revealing something to them in that breaking of the bread, which we're going to do in a moment. And he said, "This is my body, which is broken for you." But I want to look specifically at the cup of wine that they partook in. And a few months back, I commented about how they partook in 4 different cups of wine throughout the procession of the Passover meal. And the believing is because it was after supper that Christ took this cup. It was represented as the cup of redemption, which was also the cup of suffering. Okay? Through the suffering we are redeemed. Okay? So Jesus took this cup and he made this declaration. Luke 22, verse 20. In the same way, he took the cup after they had eaten, saying, "This cup which is poured out for you is the new covenant in my blood." It's the new covenant in my blood. Saying the old covenant, which was kind of established and ordered through its ordinances and different things like that, it was never the complete covenant. It was always a preservation covenant for the complete covenant, which is Jesus Christ. And so we're going to go through that and discuss that. But those who are under the blood of Christ are covenant people. And what we mean by that is those who recognize that Christ's perfect sacrifice, he lived his life perfectly and offered himself up perfectly as a sacrifice for sins. Our sins are now forgiven. You don't have the annual high priest going and offering the sin offering so that we can somehow preserve for ourselves for another year. The sacrifice was once and for all in Jesus Christ. And under his blood, under that sacrifice, he has called us into covenant with him. That's why it's a new covenant. The blood of sheep and goats was never sufficient. It was never meant to be sufficient. It was always meant, the sovereign God was always pointing to Jesus Christ as the plan, the beginning and the end of our redemption. And so we are covenant people under his blood. He's drawn us into relationship with him once and for all to say, "I abide with you, you abide in me." He has also established new covenant ordinances to remind us of the people that we are to be. And one of those we're going to remember here in a few moments, when Jesus said to his disciples, and by that the extension to the church, "Do this in remembrance of me." Why? Because we're reminded of his blood that makes us covenant people with our God. It gives us our vision and establishes our parameters. We do this regularly to remind ourselves, to remind each other, for God to remind us that we are his covenant people. I have fallen myself personally sometimes into a trap of these Sunday mornings where it becomes a little more work and preparation. And though I never do it begrudgingly, sometimes I'm like, oh, I got to get to church a little earlier that Sunday because I have a little more preparation to do and I got to be on. And I've had Sundays literally where I've woken up and I was just like, oh, it's communion today. Do I have the elements ready? Has that ever happened to you, Jim? Right? And God is calling us to that place of saying, is there anticipation in gathering around this covenant table? And remembering who I am. And in remembering who I am, we remember, and I am meaning God, we remember who we are. Right? Without vision, my people cast off restraints. We stay in the vision. With that as our context, ultimately, this is not the end goal. Even the Lord's table is not the end goal. What's the hope and the promise we're given? It's a heavenly dwelling with the Lord. We are single-minded, walking through this earth, walking through this time, walking through this global culture. We are single-minded, even as we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, even as we walk through the valley of Baca. We are single-minded that we have a sovereign King who dwells in a place that is different than this place, whose kingdom is heaven. Which is why we walk as aliens of this world. And we walk as members of his kingdom. And gathering around this table reminds us of that. With that as our context, I want to read Psalm 84 and how it applies to us. How lovely are your dwelling places, O Lord of hosts. My soul longed and even yearned for the courts of the Lord. My heart and my flesh sing for joy to the living God. I have sat regularly with people who are in their dying days, believers, who are just saying, Lord, just remove me from this. I just long to be in your presence. To be removed from this broken down body. My soul longs to be in that place. The bird has found a house, the swallow a nest for herself where she may lay her young. Even your altars, O Lord of hosts, my King and my God. That place of being jealous of those who are in that presence. I know my mom will be okay with me sharing this story. My mom went through 3 different bouts of cancer, and I was in my grade 12 year when she went through her first one, and she went through a surgery and through the treatments and stuff like that, and it did a number on her. She survived it for a number of years, probably about another 30, a little over 30 years after that yet. Maybe not quite. Not quite, but she still survived it for a number of years. But there was a sense in my mom's conversation where my mom grew up like she would love to have traveled her whole life. And it just never played out. We went on some trips down to New Mexico. I got to see the Grand Canyon, went to California, went to Disneyland. So there's one that sticks in my mind that we went as a family. But she would have loved to have traveled a lot more. But there was something that transitioned with my mom after her bout of cancer that she started looking at it saying, and it wasn't in a begrudging, my mom was not feeling sorry for herself. But something changed in her mindset where, you know what, I'm okay if I go home. Having to face her life's kind of length here on earth, I think she looked at it and she's like, okay, I may die in this moment, and I'm okay with it because of my reward. So my mom's conversation and her kind of journey kind of started, and she would often joke, hey, Mom, how are you doing? And so over the course of time, physically, my mom wore down and her hearing went and her eyesight went and different things like that. How are you doing, Mom? How are you doing? I'm okay. I listened to the funeral announcements this morning. My name wasn't on it. Those of you that are younger, you may not know this, but there's actually a thing where our parents listened to funeral announcements. It was like, hey! And over the course of time, she was just like, I just want to go home. Not because I hate my life here on earth. I'm just excited about what God has in store for me. And then I would have aunts and uncles pass away, and she'd be like, oh, I wish that was me. I'm jealous of them. And then when my dad passed away, she kind of looked, and she'd like, over the course of life, my dad had been in better health than my mom. So just looking at that logically, just thought my mom would go before my dad. And my mom looked and said, my dad's name is Henry. Henry, that's so unfair. I was supposed to go before you. And so there was a sense of, I'll say jealousy that my dad got to go there before my mom. But there's a grace that God gives us. And you know what? And I think specifically to young people. We have this sense where we're building our kingdom here on earth. We're building our wealth, we're building our occupation, we're building our family. It's all our. We really have to guard ourselves that we walk as aliens of this world. That we're not building our kingdom. We're not building our family. We're walking in His kingdom and in His family. That's how covenant people think. And so as the psalmist is writing from the perspective of a covenant person, our application in our life, we've got that to look forward to. Yes, we still journey. We don't stop journeying, but we know where that journey is headed. The Bible even says there is a journey. It says the road is narrow, and few are they who travel thereon, because we get distracted. Keep single-focused, single-minded. And as we walk with that, we pass through the valley of Baca, and we make it a place of springs. Well, we don't, but the Lord does. As we have this sense of anticipation and enjoyment, to say there is a hope. There is order to my life. And the Lord is the one that establishes it. We go from strength to strength till we appear before God in Zion. O Lord of hosts, hear my prayer. Give ear, O God of Jacob, O our covenant God. Behold our shield, O God, and look upon the face of your anointed. Now, one of the pictures of that anointed was a picture of David having that aspect of he was the anointed king, and he was given the promise that there would forever be someone from his lineage that would sit on the throne. And we know that Jesus, in the Becats, could draw his lineage, actually through Mary and through Joseph, back to David, back to King David. The fulfillment, the anointed Lord. Look upon the face of your anointed. For a day in your courts is better than 1,000 outside. I would rather stand on the threshold of the house of my God than dwell in the tents of wickedness. I would rather. Now, the Lord draws us right in, but we would say I would rather just be on the peripheral of God's kingdom than to dwell in the middle of the kingdoms of this world. It's still a better place. The Lord God is the sun and shield. He gives grace and glory, and no good thing does he withhold from those who walk uprightly. This is a good message of assurance of our salvation. He's the one that established it. He's the one that gave life to it. He's the one that protects it. And he's the one who will not withhold it from us. And extend it to us if we walk accordingly. O Lord of hosts, how blessed is the man who trusts in you. We are a covenant nation. established by our God for his glory and for his honor. That's why we gather, to remind each other of that. We gather for God to remind us of that. And we gather to spur one another on in that truth and that hope and that promise and that glory. I'm going to invite the worship team to come on up, do a song here in our preparation of our hearts. And then in a few moments, I'm going to invite you to make a pilgrimage to the table here as we remember the covenant, the new covenant that God has made with us as his covenant people. We will partake corporately in a few moments. Let's just allow our hearts and our minds to be counseled by the Holy Spirit this morning in the depth of what he has done and what he is doing.